Rundown, episode 82. This is going to be a listener type episode. You guys are going to take the reins for us a little bit today. On today's episode, so excited to get into that and your questions a bit later in the pod. But of course, got to welcome in the co-host of the show from FlamesNation.ca or Canucks Army, if that's your thing, Robert Munich. How we doing, Robert?
Yeah, doing really good. Had a good weekend. The Stanley Cup final has been fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm getting very antsy when it comes to the NHL draft. I just want the draft to get here as soon as possible right now.
Yeah, they're very, very much there with you. I'm enjoying this Stanley Cup Finals, and no one can keep a lead, and no lead is apparently safe in this thing, and back and forth, and there's no love lost in these two teams. But at the same time, it's like, can we just draft? Because that would be awesome. You got a lot of picks here to get through. Let's get going. We only have 2.5 weeks still to wait here, Robert.
Yeah, it's not that long. So yeah, I mean we can wait, but I am getting pretty pumped. I mean, just all those picks with the position the Flames are in, in a full on rebuild. This is a massive draft for them. So I'm super excited to see what happens. There's some news here from Darren Dreger that I want to throw your way because I think it's absolutely hilarious. So okay. Darren Dreger says, sources: the Edmonton Oilers are consulting with the NHLPA to see if there are any objections that must be resolved before potentially hiring Mike Babcock. Amid allegations of invading player privacy, Babcock resigned in Columbus as head coach in 2023. Further investigation may be required. The Oilers sound like they are looking seriously into hiring Mike Babcock. Wow.
Oh, man. Is coaching really the problem in Edmonton? That's my first question. Right back to you. This is ridiculous. Does Mike Babcock want to coach again? That's also a question out there. What are they doing?
What are they doing?
What are they doing?
Right. It's the roster. The roster construction is the issue, but at the same time, coaching is now going to become an issue if they hire Mike Babcock. And the whole point of this upcoming season here is basically to do everything in their power to keep Connor McDavid. And they're going to hire Mike Babcock, the coach that I think is universally hated among NHL players. What are you doing?
Hey, Connor, we found your next coach. You're going to absolutely hate him, but hey, here's Mike Babcock.
Oh, man.
Has Mike Babcock been a coach even in the past? Go back before these people hate him. Just go back to strictly his coaching career. Is he known as a great coach of goaltenders and of systems, or does he rely a lot on just lock it down? Does that inspire you if you're an Oilers fan or the Edmonton Oilers players? Does that inspire you that you want to be a better team? Mike Babcock's not the one stopping the puck here. He's not going to be the answer to fixing any offensive woes. This for me is 100% the Oilers' problem is all on the roster construction. You don't have a defense beyond two guys, if that. You don't have a bottom six that's great at defending. Come at me if you want, Edmonton Oilers fans. You don't have a roster built good enough so when it gets tough that you guys can elevate your games. I get they went into two of the last cup finals. I get that because McDavid went video game mode. But you saw this year when he's not going video game mode and he doesn't have his Luigi with him in Leon Draisaitl also going video game mode, this team just isn't good. It isn't good. And so does Mike Babcock really change the equation from what they had in Knobloch or even from Woodcroft or before him? For me, this is not a step forward for the Edmonton Oilers.
No, I mean, part of me is Mike Babcock can clearly coach hockey, and just from a strategy perspective and a defensive perspective, his resume is impressive. But at this point in time, in today's NHL, especially when players hold all the power, like a Connor McDavid, and you want to keep McDavid around, you're going to bring in the coach who, once again, universally, I think is despised among NHL players, and he has very old school tactics, and he just comes across as a cocky, arrogant asshole. If you're Connor McDavid, are you going to want to play for Mike Babcock for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years? I don't know. I would probably say no. He doesn't want to do that, and you might as well just get Mike Babcock to drive Connor McDavid to the Edmonton airport because he's gone.
Like you hear the stories of Mike Babcock, and I'm not trying to dump on the guy because we all know the stories, but there's stories like he holds Mike Modano out of his final game, so he doesn't get this 1,500 games. He holds Mike Commodore out of games just to hold him out of game. Like he does things that the players don't agree with, and I know he can coach a good defensive system, but does that system work in today's National Hockey League? What do you see that type of play anymore? It doesn't seem to fit what the Oilers are built like as. You want to play a defensive structure, sure, when you have Nick Lidstrom and Nicholas Kronwall anchoring your back end and Brian Rafalski, you can do those kind of things. When you've got a Bouchard and whatever's left of Ekholm and whatever Emberson is for you, can you really play that same style in Edmonton? I don't know if it works there. It's an interesting name for the Oilers to be hunting after.
But I love it. As a Flames fan, I love it. It's going to be a circus up there this year. I can't wait.
So the Kings just hired Laviolette. Oilers might hire Babcock. All in division. Do either of those teams scare you more if those things happen?
Well, to be honest, from a Flames perspective, I mean, it's kind of irrelevant. I mean, the Flames are going to be awful next year, so it doesn't even matter who's coaching those teams.
Do you know who loves it? The Anaheim Ducks.
Yes, Vegas Golden Knights love it. Calgary just could care less about what's going on. They're fighting for first overall next year.
Oh,
in the draft. Just want to clarify, in the draft, not the actual standings.
Yes. Interesting. What a way to kick off the podcast, dumping on the Edmonton Oilers and an absolutely ridiculous request put out there for. It's not like there's any good coaches that are hanging out there that they could go and try to interview, eh? No, none come to mind like a Gerard Gallant or anything like that, do they?
Nope, it's Mike Babcock or nothing.
I guess so. I guess they can't get the other guy, so let's go to Mike Babcock. What a ridiculous thing. Anyways, all right, let's go back to the Flames here. Let's talk about something fun and worthwhile talking about. It is draft month. We are 2 and a bit weeks away from draft, depending when you're listening to this episode of the show. What does an ideal draft look like for you, Robert? Because for me, an ideal draft might look a little different than what the other fans are looking for the Flames to be doing here. We know about pick 6. We know about trying to move up. We know about 11 picks. But what's an ideal draft for the Flames? Is it picking 11 guys? Is it picking 2 or 3 guys higher than they're slotted to pick right now? If you were looking at this draft and you were to put a picture-perfect draft out there, Robert, what's it look like?
So for me, this is the ideal draft, right? This is the ideal situation. Mm-hmm. Probably a little unlikely, but we'll throw it out into the universe regardless. So the first thing for me is I think the Flames should do everything in their power to trade up to pick 2, 3, or 4 if Ivar Stenberg is available in those spots. That's kind of the key stipulation for.
But his size, Robert.
He's so small, 5'11 and a half, 190 pounds. What's going to happen when he plays in the NHL? Oh my God! Even though he dominated against men at the World Championships and set almost records in the SHL this year as an 18-year-old.
Don't tell people to look at how big Celebrini is. Then, okay?
Ugh. So yeah, whenever Ivar Stenberg's available, and if you look at a lot of mock drafts and you listen to a lot of people who are reporting on the draft, it sounds like it's going to go McKenna, Reed, Malhotra, 1, 2, 3. So, if Stenberg's available at 4, if I'm Chicago, I'm taking him personally. But, there is a world where the Blackhawks say to themselves, we desperately need help on defense because Lev Shunov doesn't look like a number 1. Sam Renzel doesn't look like a number 1. Korchinski has not worked there. So they do need help on defense. And there is a world where the Blackhawks could take a Keaton Verhoff or a Carson Karls at that spot. Or they'd want to take that player, which means they could trade back to number 6 and essentially be guaranteed to get one of those 2 players. So maybe there's an option for the Flames to move up to pick 4. And if I'm them, I'm once again doing literally almost everything in my power to move up to that spot. I'm not trading young core members on the team. I'm not trading the 27 or 28 first round pick, but some of the assets that I would be looking to move would be Vegas's pick in 26 and 27, their first round pick, all 4 second round picks this year, both third round picks this year, and then roster players like Zach Whitecloud, Morgan Frost, Oli Mata, Blake Coleman, Joel Farabee, Devin Cooley, Connor Zary, Adam Klapka, Martin Pospisil. All those kinds of players would be in the mix. And if it meant, hey, we'll trade you our pick number 6, Vegas's 2027 first rounder, and White Cloud and 2/3, or just honestly like any combination like that, I would be more than happy to move up and take Ivar Stenberg, because I truly believe Stenberg is going to be a difference maker in this league. I think he has the potential to be a consistent 70 to 80 point player, play a strong two-way game, and make his teammates around him better. I really think he has that potential, and the Flames desperately need to find difference makers. So yeah, if my ideal draft, the first thing I'm doing if I'm the Flames is I'm trading up to take Ivar Stenberg, and I'm willing to put up like a pretty ridiculous trade offer just to move up 2 spots to take him. I think he could be that much of a difference maker for this team. So that's kind of my first one.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I'm very much in agreement. Like people are going to talk about how much it's going to cost to move up. I don't care. I honestly don't care. I've said this on many episodes of this show. I've said it on Locked on Flames when I'm a guest on that podcast as well. You got 11 picks this year, and you've got, 9 the next 3 first rounds. Like, you got so many picks coming that spending to get quality players now might be the way to go for the Flames. So I'm 100% on board, especially if a guy like Stenberg, who, let's be honest, should be going 1 or 2, regardless of who else is available. But because of needs of teams and the way other teams are leaning in their lists and how this draft's breaking down, if he's there at 4 and the Flames manage to trade up to 4 to get him, you're sprinting to the podium to make that pick happen, because that's how important this player and that pick could be to the Flames. Think about it this way as well. Like, you have an opportunity to get a very star player, maybe a difference maker in this league, or you have a chance to draft a couple of maybes with some second round draft picks and having no slight to the player, but having a Blake Coleman just hanging around in his late 30s. What's for the betterment of the rebuild for this team going forward, I think, is the quality of the player you would get in Ivar Stenberg and for what he brings to the table. I quite like that for me, Robert. Well, I'm going to add to that as well. The Flames have 6 picks in the top 55. For me, I only like to see them draft 3, maybe 4 players. Use those draft picks to move up. I think both first-round draft picks should be moved in opportunities to move up in the draft. Trade from 30-31 with a couple of seconds to get into that mid-20s and get another targeted player on your list. Trade 6 and Coleman and a future first-round pick to get up there to 4 and draft a Stenberg if he's there. Those are the type of moves I really would, in an ideal draft for me. The Flames would come away with a couple of really nice first-rounders, a high second-round or mid-second round draft pick, guys that they're very much high on. Like, move up in the second round to draft, let's say Ben McBeth from the Calgary Hitmen. He's in your own backyard. A nice upcoming defenseman for you guys to work with. These are guys that you can target, players that you would know that can be different makers, or you hope to be different makers down the line. So it's all about fitting into that quality rather than quantity conversation, Robert, for me. So to piggyback off of your first point, I'm just going to add to it. I think the Flames, if these first 6 picks, should only need to pick 3 players. Use the other picks to move up and around this draft and target your players, because you need the quality, not the quantity, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And now, are you saying when you're saying move up, but using some of those picks, are you saying like get another pick in the top 20, get another pick in the top 30, like, moving up from 31 to say 24? Like, kind of what do you have in mind there?
Yeah, something like we did last week when we were doing those trades, those mock trades, is take 31. Let's say it's 31. Take 31 and pick 36 plus another pick somewhere else, or a rush by someone else, and move up into that 24, 25 range. Be able to maybe target let's just use Jack Hextall, first name that came to my mind. He's a big target of you guys. You're able to get a player in the top that you really like. Go back in there and get a Jack Hextall. So use a second round pick, use that 30th first pick, and move up a few spots just to make sure you get your targeted player there.
I like it. My second one is kind of like in a similar wavelength. It's somehow find a way to get another pick in the top 10. So I guess, for example, say you can't move up into the top 4 to take Stenberg, and you still have your 6th overall pick. Use your 6th pick on a Carson Karls or a Vigo Bort, one of those 2 players, and then move back into the top 10 somehow. And once again, all the assets that I had mentioned earlier in my first answer, whether it's to Winnipeg at pick 8 or Florida at pick 9, two teams that want to be competitive, for the next few years, that I don't think they need this draft pick. I think they need to improve their NHL rosters to try to remain competitive. So take advantage of that. And yeah, say you trade both Vegas picks in 26 and 27, and you trade literally all 4 of your second round picks and a third round pick and throw in a Connor Zary on top of it. Once again, do everything in your power to move up back into the top 10 and get yourself a Jackson Rudolph, get yourself a Tynan Lawrence, one of those kinds of players, an Albert Smiths type of player. I would love to see the Flames do that, because if you can walk away in this draft, either in my first scenario, you walk away with Ivar Stenberg, or you walk away with 2 players in the top 8 or top 9, I think you're giving yourself some pretty good ammunition to add to your core moving forward. So yeah, I would say ideally you move up into the top 4. If that's impossible, or it's just stupid, the price to move up 2 spots, then don't do it. But then if that doesn't happen, then try to find a way to get back into the top 10 using all those assets. And I really think Winnipeg is a team that should move that pick, because their core members are signed long term. That's an organization that desperately wants to remain competitive and relevant in that market. And if it means the Flames throw in Zach Whitecloud, Morgan Frost, maybe even throw in another player like a Joel Farabee, and all of a sudden you add a top 4 defense into that group, you add 2 middle 6 forwards who are good players, and you throw in a pick or 2 in there, like that might be hard for Winnipeg to say no to. Mm-hmm. Same thing could be maybe said with the Panthers. Mm-hmm. If you look at their third pair right now, if you could add Zach Whitecloud to that right side, and all of a sudden that makes their defense even better than it already is. And maybe you send them a Farabee or a Coleman or something like that, or you send them a Cooley because they need help in net right now. Like, those are the things that I think Craig Conroy should be willing to do. I really believe that. And if you listen to Flames talk recently, Pat Steinberg has said a bunch of times that he's heard that Conroy is going to be aggressive in trying to trade up, which I think is really exciting. And kind of, everything that we've been talking about here, I really hope that he's going to do something similar to what we're discussing here.
Even pick 12 there, Robert. I was looking at the draft order here. Even at pick 12, that's New Jersey Devils. That's the team that was a lot of people picked to be like Stanley Cup final level of team. Are they a team that want to pick, or are they looking at a roster play? Would they want a guy like a Blake Coleman or a Zach Whitecloud to bolster their roster in a package to help move that pick as well? That's just outside the top 10, but on the same lines of what you're thinking of there. Like Conroy is going to be aggressive, and we hear that from people like Pat Steinberg and other media members, and I'm excited for it, because if you're aggressive at this draft, you can get a lot of things accomplished. And I think along those same lines as well, for me, I hope Craig Conroy takes advantage of the opportunity, not just drafting players. There's an opportunity here to get out in front of the area, moving him out, or finding a trade partner for Blake Coleman, or whoever else you might be thinking of. Maybe somebody magically takes Sharon Govich off your hands, or a Martin Pospisil contract off your hands. I think Conroy needs to take advantage of that part of this as well. There are going to be teams disappointed in their playoff or lack of playoff success. There's going to be teams out there that are looking to be a playoff team next year. A team like the New York Islanders comes to mind, of a team that maybe wants to do a little bit to make themselves a little harder and be into playoffs. They were almost there this past season here. Use that and get out in front of free agency a little bit as well here, and move a roster player. Help your own roster out by helping someone else's roster out. So I think for me, an ideal draft would be, yes, you're going to make draft picks, you're going to bring in players that you really like, but at the same time, moving out a body or two on the wings to allow for the next crop of players to come in. Hansik's coming back from injury. Was Andrew Basha coming into camp? Those questions. You have so many wingers right now that I think it would behoove the Flames to get out in front of that a little bit here and give themselves a little bit of space. So for me, it's not only drafting here, Robert, it's getting out in front of your roadblock of or your traffic jam of wingers on the roster.
Yeah, there's way too many. We went over it a couple episodes ago, and I mean, there's
17 bodies, man. Like, it's so many.
I was gonna say there's basically 14 NHLers, and listen, they're not great NHLers, but they're NHLers.
No.
there's enough. There's too many right now. So yeah, you're right. Moving out a couple bodies in these kinds of deals, whether it's a Coleman or a Farabee or a Zeri, those types of guys, if it helps get you over the top and it gets you back into the top 10 or top 12, then I think you absolutely do it. And the one other name I just want to mention, like I said, if you could trade to number 8 or number 9, then you get yourself a Bjork potentially, or a Smits or Rudolph or whoever, Tynan Lawrence. The other guy I'm really intrigued by is Wyatt Cullen.
Yes.
Like if you go watch what this kid can do and you read some of the scouting reports on him, at Elite Prospects, Cam Robinson came out with this scout poll. It was a really interesting read, and a lot of scouts have Wyatt Cullen as one of the best skaters in the draft, one of the best shots in the draft, highest ceiling in the draft. That dynamic ability. He's in the top 5 amongst everyone in this draft. Like I think the sky, or the ceiling is very high for a guy like Wyatt Cullen. Like he's just that dynamic player, and the Flames are missing that right now. So yeah, if they could walk away in this draft with, say at number 6, they get Bjork, and number 9, they trade up for number 9 and they get a Wyatt Cullen. Like I think you'd be thrilled if you're a Flames fan if you could walk away with a couple of picks like that. Like I'd honestly, I'd be more happy if they could pick 2 guys in the top 10 instead of picking all 11 players in their draft and just using all their picks. Like it feels like we'll call it top 12 of this draft. There's potential for, all these guys to become difference makers. Obviously not all of them will, but there's the potential. And it feels like it kind of falls off a little bit after that. And you're going to find good players, but I just don't think you'll find the great difference making players. So yeah, I would try to prioritize everything in my power to pick as many times in the top 10, or pick a guy like Stenberg and pick high.
I love that. I love that a lot. Wyatt Cullen is sneakily for me one of the best players in that top 15. I've seen him mocked as high as 8, and I've seen him mocked as low as 15. I'm like, if he's getting drafted at 15, someone's really missed the mark on this guy, because I'm with you on that. I think he's really, really good, and I think NHL wise, you can see how easily that'll translate. His game translates to the next level. Committed to Minnesota next year, if I read correctly here. It's Minnesota next year. That's a really good college program for him as well. So I like that pick from you, Robert. That's a really good one. So we got our hypotheticals here. We got our ideals, things that we'd love for the Flames to see. But what actually does this draft look like for the Flames? We know Conroy wants to be aggressive here, Robert. We've heard the rumors there. We know fans would love to be aggressive. In a perfect world, they're picking at number 2 and having their pick of the litter after. Potentially it's Gavin McKenna going to the Leafs here. What does a realistic draft, though, look like for the Flames? Are we just going to see 11 draft picks?
A realistic draft to me is a boring draft where nothing interesting happens. And I mean, this is what happens in the NHL. We talk so much about who's on the block. Are there going to be trades in the top 10? Are there going to be blockbusters? This guy's on the block. This guy's on the block. And then literally nothing happens. That's just the way the NHL works. I mean, I don't know why, but these NHL GMs, they're so afraid to take risks, and they're so afraid to make mistakes that, they end up like, look at Brad Treliving. All you hear is, oh, like Brad's in on this guy and Brad's in on that guy, and he's the most active general manager in the league. He does nothing. He does absolutely nothing. And a lot of other general managers are the exact same way. I believe Conroy is going to try to do everything he can to be aggressive and to move up, and I'm really excited to hear that. But I also know that these other NHL general managers are, like, I'm not going to call them cowards, but like they're scared to take chances, and they're so conservative. And I think that's going to start to change when you have kind of non-traditional guys taking on GM jobs, like, like a Chris McFarland in Nashville, John Chaika in Toronto, and, Sonny Meta. I think those guys will be more willing to take chances than just your former hockey player. But anyway, realistic draft. So I'll just say the Flames, they end up keeping their 6th overall pick, and they select Keaton Verhoff, which I would be pretty happy with, but it's not like the sexiest name out there. And then I think they'll keep all their other picks, and they'll end up using a lot of them. And, maybe they'll trade a 3rd and a 4th to move up into the very beginning of the 3rd round, or kind of in the middle of the 2nd round or something like that. They'll use maybe a couple picks to trade up in spots, but it's not going to be anything consequential. It's not going to be anything earth shattering. So yeah, I say they'll select Keaton Verhoff number 6. They'll miss out on like fun guys like the Rucks, and they'll just end up kind of picking your kind of run of the mill prospects, and they'll move on with their day. That's kind of what a realistic draft looks like for me. It's boring, but that's just kind of how I see it, like realistically playing out.
Okay, Robert, time to be a wet blanket. Ready? What is the likelihood, and this is going to irk some people, I know for sure. You're not doing it with pick 6, but what are the chances the Flames take pick 31 and trade back?
With the amount of second and third round picks they already have, I don't know if I see that happening. But if Conroy has the mentality of, we need to add as many bodies as possible, and we like guys ranked, on our list 20 through 40, and there's a bunch available, then I guess sure, go ahead. But I don't know with all those second and third round picks. I don't know if Conroy would be into that.
Thank God he's not Brad Treliving, because that's the Brad Treliving move right there. I had to ask it. I don't think it's going to happen, but I had to put it in the ether there as part of the conversation. I'm with you, though. And I like how you worded it at the very beginning of your answer there. A realistic draft is a boring draft. It's the Flames pick 11 players, maybe 10 with one small move up in that 4th round, 3rd round, like you mentioned there. They pick who's ever left of that top 6, Carrolls or Verhoff, whoever it might be. Fans are going to be happy with that player. They're gonna settle for some guy that maybe we've never heard of at 31, just some random player. And then they're going to draft 4 guys in the 2nd round that they're hoping turn into something eventually down the line. And we're going to get a few more Etienne Morans in the organization, maybe a couple of Andrew Basha type players in the organization, and a hope and a prayer of like a guy like Luke Misa turning into something type of players, which are great players. They're great guys. They're good prospects to have in your system, your organization. You need bodies in your organization. But for me, it would be a disappointing draft to have this type of realistic draft for the Flames. I know it's fun to talk about trading up and having this trade and that trade move, and maybe getting Stenberg at number 4 or number 2 and those type of things. I think what we're going to see from the Flames, though, is somewhere in the middle between the hypotheticals and the ideal that you and I put out there and the realistic boring draft. I think Craig Conroy will be aggressive enough that he'll convince a general manager or 2 to be a dance partner with him and allow him to make, say, a move up from 31, to maybe move a 2nd rounder up as well to help him facilitate that type of trade, those sort of things. So that's my hope, is that we get somewhere in the middle of these 2 ideologies here, Robert.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. And like this conversation, like it's very realistic for that scenario to play out. I mean, so now let me ask you this.
Yes.
At 6 overall, is there a guy in that range who you would be disappointed in the Flames taking?
Yes, if they take Smits.
Me too.
Like I understand how good he's been, and he's playing against men, but if he's drafted in the top 8, I think that's someone's taking a flyer just for the sake of taking a flyer. There's literally 7 guys on my list I would take at that number 6 spot, and most of them are going to be gone by the time you get there. But if Smits is the guy there and the Flames take him, I think I'd be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, he probably has a pretty high floor, but I just don't know if he has a very high ceiling. To me, Smits almost feels like like an elevated Kevin Ball. Like he's a bigger guy, decent puck mover, decent skater, but he's going to be kind of that, defensive defenseman. At the NHL level, which could end up being a very valuable player. I mean, you need your 6'3" kind of shutdown defenseman. You definitely need those guys. And it was interesting. I forget who it was. It was somebody who's been covering the draft combine last week, and they asked him, out of everything that you heard from the draft combine, was there a player who you heard did not interview well? And the one guy he'd mentioned was Smits, and I guess Smits he's like pretty arrogant. He's a pretty cocky kid, and that's also kind of another red flag. Like, I'd almost rather see the Flames take someone with a higher offensive ceiling while also being able to play defense, whether that's Carl's, Verhoff, Daxon Rudolph. If they're going to go defense, I'd rather see them go in that direction. To be totally honest, yeah, I'm with you. If they took Smits, I would trust Conroy that he knows what he's doing, but at the same time, that would be kind of the one guy I'd be like, that's a little disappointing at 6 overall.
To throw one right back at you here along the same lines, in a certain world, Keaton Verhoff or Carroll's is sitting there at number 6. Would it disappoint you like it would half of Twitter if Tynan Lawrence was picked over either of those defensemen for you?
I think I would be okay with it because I think the Flames are they're taking a home run swing there. And the thing I really like about Lawrence is that, number one, he's a center. The Flames desperately need high-end centers. He'd become one of their bigger forward prospects. I think Lawrence is like 6 feet or 6'1". So the Flames, they do need to add a little bit of size to their forward group. And then number 3 is the kid can fly. Like he's one of the best skaters in this draft class. And this, as we all know, this Flames team, they need to get way faster. They're so slow right now. And looking at their prospect pool, it looks like Greshny's a good skater. Wittenbach, Cullen Potter, all seem to be like pretty good skaters. And I think you need to add good skaters to that group to continue that momentum on. So yeah, I would not be upset if they decided to go down that road with Tynan Lawrence. I just, we've had the conversation, guys going to the NCAA at such a young age, it's a huge learning curve. Like it's massive, especially if you're not a guy who's as talented as a guy like Gavin McKenna. McKenna was able to figure it out, but I look at a guy like Lawrence, it might take him a little bit more time, and I think that's fine. Like I still think he has great pedigree. I think he's got great skill. Like I said, the skating is great, and he's a center. I would be very intrigued, and I would not be upset if they went down that road.
He's also still 17. So
one of the youngest players in this draft class.
Yeah, I would actually like if they took Tynan Lawrence at 6, and that's an unpopular opinion. I know passing on Carroll's or Verhoff isn't the sexy thing to do, but I like what Tynan Lawrence can bring to your lineup, and being that age and having another year under his belt at the NCAA level, I think could do a lot of wonders for this guy. And I think that it might be viewed as more of a project type of pick at 6, but at the same time, I think you're not looking to win the next 2 seasons, so why not use a pick on a player that you think you can get the most out of and get him to the next level? And for me, that's Tynan Lawrence. So very interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like just the way I view it for the Flames is that McKenna, Stenberg, Reed, Malhotra will guaranteed be gone by pick 6. The Flames will not be able to pick one of those players unless they move up. But at pick 6, they'll have their pick at one of Keaton Verhoff, Carson Karls, Vigo Bjork, Albert Smits, Daxon Rudolph, Wyatt Cullen, Tynan Lawrence. I think that's kind of the group they're looking at. And me personally, I'd be pretty pumped and pretty happy if they picked any of those players except Smits. And even if they did take Smits, I'd still feel like okay about it. But I think in terms of like power rankings, in terms of excitement, Smits would be at the bottom of that tier. But at the same time, I still think he could be a good player, but I just wouldn't be as pumped up. But any of those other players, I would be pretty happy. Like even if they reach for a Rudolph, I'd be fine. If they reach for Cullen, I would be fine with that because I do think those guys have really high ceilings.
If they take Smits, they better trade back up in that top 15 and get somebody else as well. That's all I'll see there.
Yeah, and if they love
along the
Smits,
lines.
I was just gonna say if they love Smits, like then make a trade back into the top 10 or the top 12 and try to take him there. But picking him at 6 seems like a bit of a stretch.
All right, quick pivot on a conversation here. Let's do a little bit of a hypothetical. It comes to draft day, and this idea comes from a Kent Wilson article, so credit to Mr. Kent Wilson. Excellent read if you want to go find that. He put out a little bit of an article. If it comes to the draft day and there's a young center available, and he used the examples of Kent Johnson, Mason MacTavish, or Shane Wright, should the Flames make a move? And, would you be okay with them making a move for a younger center, someone in his early 20s, someone that could possibly come in here and have an elevated role? What are your thoughts on those type of moves? I know we've had that conversation a little bit beforehand, but it's interesting that it's now out there in the universe. And Ken Wilson article was one of the few places I saw this idea from. So we might as well jump on the wagon here, Robert. Kent Johnson, Mason MacTavish, and Shane Wright at the draft. If you get a phone call from one of those tables, hey, are you interested? Are you interested in those young centers?
I'm personally not at this moment in time. If I were the Flames, I would not make any of those trades right now. To me, making those types of deals is something you do, let's call it 3 or 4 years from now, when you're entering your contention window and you want to add that young center or that young skilled forward at 21 to 23 years old, I think that's when you do it, because you want to take advantage of their prime. You want to take advantage of their, call it 23 to 28-year-old seasons. And if the Flames end up acquiring any of those players right now, I still think the Flames are a long ways away from being legitimately competitive again. I still think they're 3 or 4 years away. So, if you bring in a Shane Wright or you bring in a Mason MacTavish, you're kind of wasting the prime of their career on a team that's going to be out of the playoffs. And I would rather see them use like the draft pick capital when they're ready to get out of the rebuild mode, kind of like where San Jose is right now, or kind of like where Montreal is. When you're ready to get out of that rebuild mode, that's when you use the picks, and that's when you use the prospects to bring in the young NHL player who's available. Because I just, say you bring in MacTavish, what is he, 23 years old?
Yep.
By the time you're actually good again, he's probably going to be 27, and he might have a year or two left on his contract, and then all of a sudden you're going to have to pay him a ton of money, well into his 30s when you enter your contention window. Like, is that what you want to be doing? Or would you rather wait 3 or 4 years and find the Mason MacTavish of 3 or 4 years from now, take advantage of their prime years, and then, when the time comes to sign them, it's like, okay, well, we got the best out of them, and, now we could trade them, or we can to decide to keep them. Like, that's kind of how I view it. So yeah, if it were up to me, I would not be interested in any of those guys right now.
I tend to agree with you, but I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate on this just to have a bit of a conversation on it. If the Flames go out here on draft day and they move a Morgan Frost off this roster, or a Ryan Strome, let's say use a couple examples of a couple centers here, and they move them off the roster, and then come free agency day that week or something, they circle back around, they trade for a Mason MacTavish as a replacement for one of those two guys, that's how I'm okay with this type of a move. You're bringing in a body. He's a little bit younger than Morgan Frost, a guy who's maybe similar skilled to Morgan Frost. Can you get a little bit more out of him? He's closer to the age group of a lot of your players as well. So that, for me, is where it makes sense for the Flames to go after these guys. If it's kind of replacing something that you've traded off your roster that you don't have in the organization. You trade a center now, there's no one coming for the end of the season at the earliest in a Cole Reshny type of player. So can you bring in a guy to replace a Morgan Frost type of situation? That's where I think I'd be okay with it. But overall, a lot of what you said there, Robert, I'm absolutely on board with. They're just the contending window versus the ages of these players. They don't quite match up for me either, but just a little devil advocate there for you.
Yeah, and like depending on how you look at next season, trading a guy like Morgan Frost, not replacing him, might be the best thing.
Yeah, true.
It might get them even closer to 32nd in the NHL standings, which I would love to see them finish there, because they can guarantee you a top 3 pick. But then if you're someone who, say you're a season ticket holder who wants to see more winning, or you're in the management team and you're one of those guys that we've seen on the chase who are like, we got to get better next year. They're probably thinking to themselves, we need a Mason MacTavish or Kent Johnson. But if on the Flames, just be patient. I think this year, we talked about this about a month ago. I think the worst is behind us when it comes to the rebuild. I think the last 2 to 3 years here in Calgary have been absolutely miserable. I think it's been terrible hockey. They've been in the mushy middle. They had no star players. They were old. They had guys who wanted out. Like I think the last 3 years have been awful here in Calgary. And I think that now it's only going to go up from here. And heading into next year, as a Flames fan, you're going to get to watch a bunch of young players. You're going to get to see the future. You're going to get to see, those guys play higher in the lineup. And then ultimately it's going to lead to, hopefully, a pick in the top 3 at next year's draft. And, depending on what they do at this year's draft, adding 3 or 4 potential core members of your team over the next couple drafts here, all of a sudden the Flames have like a really exciting, young, fun core to move into Scotia Place with. And, I think that's really exciting. I would way rather see them be patient and prioritize young players than going out and making those kinds of trades. I think like I said, I think the Flames, the rebuild, the worst is behind us. And I think it's only going to get better from here. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I hope Craig Conroy and Maloney and ownership all feel the same way. I hope they're all willing to be patient, and I hope they're all kind of willing almost to treat this year as a bit of a sacrifice just for the greater good of the organization moving forward.
Yeah, those kind of trades to trade for guys like MacTavish and those guys while still having Morgan Frost on the roster type of deal, those feel like trying to rush the rebuild, and that's really what you want to fight against. So, good conversation, Robert. Really good questions out there. Speaking of questions, I'm going to turn that over to you because you asked on Twitter for some listener questions, and we got some good ones out there. So, Robert, take it away. What do we got for questions?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you to everyone who responded and asked a question. That's awesome, and we really appreciate it. So yeah, we'll start up with Isaac Amelia. They say, since the second first-round pick that the Flames have is going to be 30th or 31st, how realistic is it that they will trade that up? And should the Flames try to get both Ruck twins with the chemistry that they've built? So I mean, I'll throw it to you. Where are you at on trading up from pick 30 or pick 31, and where are you at on the Rucks?
I think that pick is the most likely of the Flames picks to be traded up with. I think it's more likely we see 31 or 30 moved up in an aggressive manner. That's why I'm so high on it when I do like my mock trades and stuff like that. So I think it's a very high chance that one gets moved. It's in a good spot too, right at the end of that first round, a good spot to move up and snag a late first guy. I'm all for the Rucks. It's going to take a lot of maneuvering and dancing and finding some willing trade partners maybe to get it done with. But if you can move up from 31 to that 25-ish spot where Liam is kind of mocked at, and then find a way to maybe get back in the end of the first round at 31 to get his brother Marcus, I think it's likely you can do that type of thing. I wonder the trade package you'd have to get together, though, because other teams are going to know you're doing that once you draft the first Ruck brother and how they want to play together, and they've made it known that they want to be together. So I think it's going to take a lot of gymnastics on the trade floor. Be fun to watch that happen, but I'm all for it if the Flames can find a way to do it.
Yeah, in terms of the Vegas pick, realistically, we talked about the realistic draft scenario. If there is a realistic trade up scenario, it's definitely that. It's definitely pick 31, pick 35, and then Utah or Ottawa's pick to move up to 24 or something like that. I think it is very realistic. The Flames could move up into that kind of range. And then when it comes to the Rucks, I mean, it's interesting because you take a look at some prospect experts' lists. I mean, Ruck is as high as 10 or 11 on some guys' lists, and Liam, that is. And then there are other lists where he's kind of early 30s. So when it comes to the Rucks, it really just depends on how the NHL and how all these front offices see these two kids panning out. If they just think they're going to be maxing out as third line players in the NHL, I could see actually Liam being available at 30 or 31, and then Marcus being available at pick 35.
What a dream that'd be.
Yeah, and you wouldn't even have to do any sort of movement, but it all depends on how these teams view them. Like, there's a world the Flames could get both those guys, and there's a world where they get picked quite a bit sooner than where the Flames are picking. So that's going to be one of the most interesting storylines to watch in the whole draft. So definitely.
Let me jump back in there.
Yeah.
I'm along that same lines, as I said, I would be for the Rucks. I'm not going to prioritize them over picking somebody else that I have above them on my list. So if you're getting down to pick 25 and you've traded up for them, and you have, say, JP Hurlburt and Matthias Preston ahead of both Ruck brothers on your list, and you've traded up to get somebody, don't just trade up to get him and to make sure you stick to your list at the same time here. So they are nice players, they are great players, and much like Robert said there, if you project them to be third line guys, but you project, say, a JP Hurlburt to be a second line center in this league, then go with your list still. Stick with your list here. So don't deviate from your list just to get them. But if they're in play at your pick, then by all means, let's have some fun.
I like it. Next question's from Rob S. on Twitter. There's been a lot of talk about draft trades. I am interested in your perceived value of taking a bunch of good players versus ones that look great today. So I think that kind of what that means is, using all 8 of your picks in the first 3 rounds, or should you use those picks to move up to take 1 or 2 really quality players? He finishes his question with, I feel the Flames have better long-term odds with taking all their shots in the second round This is where a good scouting department makes their mark, who quietly grow into something versus trading those picks for an 8th or 7th overall. Where are you at on that? I mean, this is kind of the quality versus quantity debate.
Yeah, it is. I get what he's saying there, but at the same time, go look at the percentages of players picked after 25 that make it to the National Hockey League. So for me, it's all about the quality you're going to get at, say, pick 10. Say you trade back up in there to 9 or 10 or something like that. With those picks, and you have an opportunity to, say, take any number of guys. We've talked about White, Colin on this show. What if you draft up there and you get Colin at 10 to match with what you've picked at 6 in, say, Keaton Verhoff? I like that a lot better than having 4 guys that may or may not be something down the road in the National Hockey League. So it's all about what you prefer as a lottery ticket. Do you want all the lottery tickets, or do you want 1 or 2 that you've really handpicked that give you a better chance at winning here? So for me, I'm all about the quality over the quantity this time around. You have 11 of these picks this year. So for me, I'm still in favor of trading up and making sure you have the quality in here. As much fun as it would be to see 6 guys picked in the top 2 rounds, top 55 picks, then it also becomes a numbers game with the contracts, stuff like that down the road here. But I'm still very much on team quality.
If the Flames were in a position where they were literally just starting the rebuild and their prospect cupboards were empty, you 100% use all these picks, and you add as many bodies to the group as possible. But I think they're in a position here where they've drafted pretty well over the last 2 to 3 years. They've added a lot of bodies to this group, and now it's time to prioritize that quality. And I would rather see the Flames pick twice, we'll call it the top 10 or top 12. I'd rather see them use those 2 picks than picking 8 times in the first 3 rounds, or even using all 11 picks that they have. I would be more than okay with that, because, like John said, I mean, I've been doing this graphic for Canucks Army and Flames Nation where I show who's been picked at the spots that these teams picks own, over the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. So I put out for Vancouver, they have the 24th overall pick. The group of players picked 24th overall in the last 20 years is not impressive at all.
It's not. It's
Ryan O'Reilly and Travis Konecny as by far and away the 2 best players, and then there's a steep drop off. And I posted one for the 33rd overall pick that Vancouver owns, and the best player by far is Ivan Barbashev, and the rest is not good. So I would rather see them prioritize picking in the top 10 multiple times where you have the best chance possible to find a good NHL player or a difference maker, rather than take swings on guys, picks 30 through, 35 through 60, whatever they own there. So yeah, I'm definitely more of the quality versus quantity right now.
Yeah, it's for me, it's not even a close conversation. Like I like how you put it at the beginning too. If like this was the start of the rebuild, absolutely bring 11 players in. If the Flames draft 11 times in this draft, I think I'd be kind of disappointed, to be honest.
I'm with you. Next question comes from Owen. Will the Flames trade for Brendan Gallagher or similar salary dump players?
They should, if it comes with an asset. If you can get Brendan Gallagher out of Montreal and they give you, I don't know, a 3rd or a 4th to take his whole salary with you next year's draft, it's all about accumulating the assets, right, to help you build your roster down the road. 1 year left, $6.5 million. The Flames have the cap room, so if a deal like that comes on the table and you're getting a nice asset and not giving up much, if anything, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think in order for the Flames to do something like that, I think they do need to trade multiple forwards off the current roster before you do a move like that.
Yeah, true.
So, say, for example, at the draft, they end up using, call it Morgan Frost and Blake Coleman in deals. And, all of a sudden there's a significant void in that kind of veteran leadership kind of culture role within the team. Then I think you definitely look to bring in a guy like Brendan Gallagher, who only has 1 year left on his deal, and put him in a leadership role. And then come the trade deadline, maybe you can move him out for, at half of his salary for a 3rd or a 4th round pick or something like that. Or you just keep him in the dressing room, because if you're only getting a 4th round pick, then it's just like, okay, why even trade him? So yeah, if they end up moving out a couple forwards, between we'll call it now, in the second or third day of free agency, and Gallagher's still available for trade, then yeah, absolutely go and do something like that. But if they don't move any forwards out, then I just don't think it makes sense to add yet another body to this team, because like we mentioned earlier, there's too many forwards and too many wingers in particular right now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Next question from Herbert T. Roach. With some pundits suggesting the Flames will take a big D-man like Gustafsson with the second first-rounder, it got me wondering how Maceo Phillips' D+1 season went. I know offense isn't his thing, but what are people saying about his defensive game this past season? So I believe he was at the U.S. development program this past year, and from everything I read and just kind of listened to, it sounds like, Maceo Phillips is the kind of player who he was picked. It almost feels like a bit of a Hunter Smith, Keegan Kanzig kind of pick, where you're picking a guy who's absolutely massive and who's a really good athlete. Sorry, he played in the USHL this year with the Green Bay Gamblers. 11 points in 44 games. So yeah, I think he's one of those guys. If he ever makes it to the NHL, I think he's going to be, strictly a defensive defenseman, kind of a third pair guy who can lay some people out. He can take advantage of his size and his athleticism, but he'll never be that offensive defenseman. He'll never be a solid puck mover. He'll never play on a power play. This prospect feels like a guy who maxes out as a third pairing defenseman. And that's kind of how I see it right now. How about you?
This for me is the definition of taking a flyer on a guy in the third round. This is what a third round draft pick looks like. A guy that may or may not develop into something. And he is what he is. He's a stay-at-home defenseman. He's never produced. Like, you look at his numbers and he's never produced. That's just not his game. And he's counted on for one thing and one thing only, and that's to shut down other teams' players. And so it's the definition for me of a flyer. I don't know if he becomes an NHLer at the end of the day, but that's what you do in rounds 3 through 8. You take flyers on guys that you think you can get something out of, and some of them work and some of them don't. Johnny Gaudreau was a smash hit in round 4, and TJ Brody was a smash hit in round 4. Maceo Phillips just doesn't look like that for me, but it is what it is. That's what you do with third round picks. So I'm not really shaken up over it, to be honest.
Yeah, there's going to need to be some serious development from an offensive perspective if he's ever going to want to play in the NHL. He obviously has the size. Just looking here on his elite prospects page, 6'6", 234 pounds at 19 years old. I saw him at the Calgary Stampeders game last year when all the prospects went and watched, and he is built like a truck. Like, so the physicality and probably the defensive side of the game, I don't think will be an issue. It'll just be, can you skate and can you move the puck at an NHL level? And that remains to be seen. So, like you said, they took a swing. We'll see if it works. If it works, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's just how the NHL draft works. Some
guys are just career AHLers, ECHLers, and that for me is what Maceo Phillips might turn into here. So.
Yeah. Next question from Big Daddy.
Love it.
Love that name. What do you think it would take for the Flames to leave the draft with both Karls and Bjork? And would you pull the trigger?
It would take a lot of trading, take aggressive trading, aggressive moving. Yes, I would do it. I absolutely would do it. We've spent half an episode this week. We spent time last episode and all off season as far as saying how aggressive we think that Craig Conroy might be and should be at this draft. So if you can get, Karls at 6 and swing back into that Florida pick, say with Bjork still available and bringing him home, you're running out of this draft with Karls and Bjork. I think you do that in a heartbeat. You're probably not picking in the second round if that's the case. And that's okay with me. Because you're going to get 2 quality players that you think can be high quality NHLers. So I'm absolutely on board for that. That's a great question from Big Daddy.
Me too. I'm in the same boat. I would target the Winnipeg or the Florida picks if Bjork is even available by then. I could see Seattle picking Bjork at 7, and I could also see them taking Karls at 7. Like, I don't know if you're going to be able to get both players, but say Bjork is available at 8. You've already picked Karls at 6. I would Winnipeg, and I would throw, like a trade package at them, something along the lines of like a Morgan Frost, Joel Farabee, and maybe throw Zach Whitecloud in the mix along with maybe a 2027 Vegas first round pick, something like that. Because Morgan Frost has 1 year left on his deal. Joel Farabee has 2 years left on his deal. Zach Whitecloud has 2 years left on their deal. I don't know if those guys are going to be long-term members of the Flames. So if you could trade them to a team that struggled last season because of depth, the Winnipeg Jets issue was not Scheifele, Connor, Morrissey, Hellebuck. Their problem was they couldn't get anything from the rest of their lineup. So if you give them 2 middle six forwards and a top 4 defenseman, along with a 2027 first round pick that they could use at the trade deadline to bring in yet another player, that might be something a desperate Winnipeg Jets team could be interested in. And, I might be out to lunch just because of the contract situations. Who knows if any of those guys would be willing to re-sign in Winnipeg. Zach Whitecloud might be able to, because I think that he is from Manitoba, so it might be a bit of a homecoming, which could be cool for him, but not so sure if a guy like Frost or Farabee would re-sign there. But that's even like maybe take out Frost, you put in Zeri, or you take out Farabee and you put in Zeri. That's the kind of deal I would be willing to make. I would be willing to throw a lot at the Winnipeg Jets to get that 8th pick and walk away with those 2 players.
You can say similar about the Florida Panthers. Like, this is the team that's trying to win a third Stanley Cup in 4 years, right? So it's do they really want to pick a centerman for down the line, or do they want a body now? Could they use a Blake Coleman and somebody else to move up into that and to be able to secure that pick? So I think that's also a likely trade scenario. I think Winnipeg and Florida are going to be 2 teams to watch at this draft. Those 2 are the most intriguing to me in that top 10 to move. So it definitely would do it if it's on the table for sure.
Next question from Sunnyside Alts. Would you trade up to number 4 for Ivar Stenberg if he's there?
Yes.
100%. Yeah, we talked about earlier in the episode. If I'm Conroy, I'm willing to part with a ton to move up to get that 4th overall pick to take Ivar Stenberg, because once again, it's just so incredibly difficult to find meaningful difference makers in the NHL these days, especially in a 32-team league, especially when you're a small Canadian market. That's not the most desirable place in the world. And I do think that reputation is getting better with the new arena coming and the way Craig Conroy runs his team and Ryan Huska as the head coach. I think the reputation in Calgary is starting to change a bit, but Calgary will never be Nashville. Calgary will never be Florida, Tampa, Dallas, all these different places. So do everything you can to move up and try to find a legit future star player in this league in Ivar Stenberg.
Yeah, he's for me by and far away the second best player, if not the best player in this draft, ranking wise. Like McKenna, Stenberg, you can have him 1-2 either way, however you like it. Those are the 2 best players in this draft, so they have an opportunity to get those kind of guys, because other teams are trying to find a niche role like a Chase Reed in San Jose or Maholtra in Vancouver type of players. You absolutely make that type of move, difference maker all day long.
Next question's from Jason. So it's a 2-parter. So he says, if the Flames want to trade Coleman at the draft with retention, can they include the Markstrom contract as part of the trade, i.e. Weber Price traded? The answer to that is no. So players that you withhold salary on or you eat salary on who are still in the NHL, you cannot trade that salary retention spot to another team. So if Markstrom, if he was still within the Flames organization and on LTIR like Weber and Price were, then yes, you could trade the contract, but you can't trade any retention slot. So there's kind of the first answer. And then the second answer, or the second question is offer sheets, between 2 to 4 million that would cost a 2nd round pick. Do you see anyone in that range the Flames could target? So I'll take this one first, because I went and looked on Puckpedia before we recorded here. So there's a few guys that kind of stood out to me. Number 1, if the Flames were ever to do an offer sheet, that's the offer sheet I would seriously look at, because you absolutely do not want to put your 2027 first round pick in any sort of deal. Same with your 2028 and your 2029 first round picks. You can't do that right now with the spot the Flames are in. But yes, giving up a 3rd or a 2nd round pick in an offer sheet, I think makes a lot of sense. So the guys I looked at were number 1, Maverick Bourque. We've heard this name a lot, but it makes sense because Dallas is capped out and they need to re-sign Jason Robertson. and they still have Ben and Sagan on the books, so you could take advantage of the Stars because they're so cap strapped. And if you threw a 1-year deal at Bork worth $4.7 million and you only gave up a second, I think you might be happy with that. I think Bork would be an upgrade on a lot of the Flames wingers right now. So yeah, I would have no issue with that. A couple other names, Mackie Samoskevich in Florida. The Panthers are probably going to look to add to their team this summer, and it's going to take some serious salary cap space to do that. So by the time they add to their team, will they even have enough to match an offer sheet of $4.7 million on Samoskevich? That's another option. And then a couple other guys, these are kind of reaches, but if you really like a guy like Jack Drury, maybe as like a third line option long term, maybe you could target him. Or another guy I've always liked, Paul Cotter from the New Jersey Devils. I think he's a rock solid bottom six forward with a ton of speed and physicality and a pretty good set of hands. So if you want to go after him and the Devils are looking to make moves and they're cap strapped, then maybe that's another option too. So yeah, there's 4 that I picked out: Maverick Bork, Mackie Samoskevich, Jack Drury, or Paul Cotter. I mean, how do you feel about some of those names?
There's one I really, really like, and I'm glad you mentioned him there. For me, it's Mackie Samoskevich. The reason being is he's been in the playoffs with the Florida Panthers, so he knows how to win in this league, so that matters to me. He's also a guy that can play center in a pinch if you need. He's played center before. He's a right shot. He's a nice size frame to him, and he has the ability to be able to score and to do more than one thing for a lineup. I don't mind the Bork one. The other guys, for me, it's the age thing. I'm going to be ageist in this as well. If I'm going to offer sheet a guy, I want a young player who I can bring in, get adapted to the organization, and have an opportunity to try to sign longer term if things work out. So for me, Mackie Samoskevich makes the most sense in a qualifying offer. You got to be careful though with those as well. I know Florida might not match that offer, so it might be a good opportunity to bring in a nice young player. And then I'm going to circle back around to the Coleman question. In order for the Flames to trade Coleman with retention, they have to wait till July 1st when those reset, because then they'll have 2 coming off the books. They're maxed out on their retention spots, unfortunately, at the moment. So.
Next question from B. Walker. Who was the player in the top 5 to 10 of this draft class that you guys feel might be in the bust category? I feel like it's Verhoff. He's got a good shot. He can play physical, but he doesn't wow you with his skating. He's not overly physical for his size. That's the one question I have for you guys. So who in the top 5 to 10 do you think could be a bust in this year's draft, John?
Smits. I'm going back to Smits. I hate to pick on the guy, but he does one thing, and if that one thing isn't at a high level, then I'm not sure what he brings to a hockey team and what he does for you longer term. So no disrespect to the guy. I think he's played very good in opportunities, but for me, Smits rings up there for me. I disagree with the Verhoff one, though. I think Verhoff's a sneaky pick.
Yeah, the interesting thing with, guys who are ranked in that kind of 5 to, we'll call it 12 range, it feels like a lot of them have pretty high floors, as well as high ceilings. So it's kind of tough to pick one. I don't know if Tynan Lawrence is in that mix of top 5 to 10, but he might be the one guy I'd look at just because he does feel like a boom or bust prospect. It feels like, if he hits, he could easily be a top 6 center, play with a ton of speed, be a kind of, 50 to 70 point guy. That's kind of what I see his ceiling as. But, there is also a world where, like a lot of these scouts, they did not like what they saw from him this season. And if he kind of continues down that trajectory and, he's not even a point per game player in the NCAA next year and he kind of takes a step back, then I could see him, maybe not being a full-time NHL player. So it feels like in terms of like the lowest floor out of the guys that we've been talking about, it's probably Lawrence, but he's also got a very high ceiling. It feels like the range of outcomes for him is pretty high. So I would probably look at Lawrence in that scenario.
Yeah, fair.
And then kind of a similar question from Ronan, what would be considered a letdown in terms of player X being drafted? We kind of talked about that earlier in the show. I think we both said Smits. We probably don't need to dive into that much longer. And then finally, the last question's from Dean C. He says, I have one. Why do you think the Flames won't want whoever falls to number 6? And I think that was a shot at me there from Dean.
Yeah, Robert, why do you hate pick 6?
I've been talking about how I would desperately try to move up to take Ivar Stenberg, but if that's not an option and the Flames can't pull that off, then I think you're more than happy to take a lot of these players at number 6, whether it's Verhoff, Karls, Bjork, Rudolph, Cullen, Lawrence. I personally would be pretty happy if the Flames could end up with any one of those players. So, that's how I see it.
We've heard Conroy say more than once how excited he is and that there's going to be a player that he really likes at number 6, regardless of how the board falls to them. So I think that was a shot to you on the Twitter machine there. And it's a great question, though. Like, I think the Flames are going to be excited about who comes in here at 6, whether it is Karls, whether it is Verhoff, whether maybe it is Lawrence, whoever it might be. Bork would be a popular one amongst the fans as well. And I echo those sentiments. I think the more that I watch these guys and read up on these guys, I'm pretty excited for whoever falls there to 6, because I think the Flames are going to come away with a guy. They might not be the high-end difference maker of Gavin McKenna, but you're going to get yourself, I think, a pretty solid hockey player for the Flames team. And I'm excited for that.
And we heard in the chase, after the Flames found out they got the 6th overall pick, you heard Don Maloney, we love pick 6. Pick 6 is good for us. We love pick 6. So the Flames, I think, are going to be really happy with whoever they take there. And like we said, I do think there's a lot of good players there. So there's a lot to be excited about for this upcoming draft. I'm literally on the edge of my seat. I cannot wait for draft day. It's going to be awesome. But that's it for questions.
It's weird that you almost wish the Stanley Cup final would hurry the hell and get over with so you can go drafting. It's a weird thing to be a part of, but when you have an opportunity the Flames have in front of them, and you've been looking forward to being in the bottom of the standings, so you can pick a high end prospect, you kind of want to hurry up and get there. It's the hurry up and wait scenario right now for the Flame fans, and we'll eventually see who it's going to be, and I think we're going to like who it's going to be at the end of the day, Robert. Anything else you want to bring up on today's podcast? If not, where can the folks find you and what's coming up from you guys on flamesnation.ca?
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at Ring of Fire CGY. Lots of random goals of the day, and I've been putting together some Who Says No trade proposals, which has been fun, except when the opposing fans come in my mentions and they call me an effing idiot. That's never fun to read, but it's all part of the game. And then Flames Nation, just lots of draft coverage, and it was interesting. So today, I've been putting out all the draft classes from the last 25 years, and the comments have been hilarious. I mentioned that last week.
It's been great.
Today I took a break and was like, let's feature one of their better draft classes, and it was 1984. They took 4 players that all played 1,000 games in the league, and one of them was Brett Hull, and you almost forget that Brett Hull was drafted by the Flames. And I posted a couple different pieces of content from Brett Hull with his time with the Flames, the day he signed, and then also his first career hat trick, which came in a Flames sweater. It was weird to see Brett Hull scoring goals for the Calgary Flames, because whenever you think of the 80s and the Stanley Cup championship team, you never think of Brett Hull. I wonder now, I've talked to my dad about this, who was a diehard Flames fan at the time, and he said the Brett Hull trade helped the Flames win a Stanley Cup in 1989. Rob Ramage played a big role, and I think it was they got a backup goalie, and the names I'm jogging my memory here, but
Rick Wamsley,
thank you. And I guess both players played a big time role on that team. So in the grand scheme of things, I guess it doesn't matter. But in hindsight, you're always kind of wondering, what could the Flames have looked like with Brett Hull on that team as well? That could have been scary good.
Yeah, you can make the argument that they don't win the cup without that trade, though. Ramage was a huge part of the 89 team and what he brought to the Flames organization. And if you look at the names that were behind Mike Vernon at the time, I think Rick Wamsley was a nice upgrade on the backup position, which mattered back then as well a lot for those teams. If you found a way to get Rob Ramage in Flames uniform without giving up Brett Hull, I wonder what that would have looked like, because that would have been a super team. I think that would have been a team that could have easily repeated, if not do 3 or 4 Stanley Cups in a short time, because that was quite the team that the Flames were able to put together for 80 and 88 and 89, and then part of 90. Lots of good players there. I've quite enjoyed reading the comments on the Flames Nation draft post, people are about ready to jump off the CN Tower, the Calgary Tower, because there are some god awful trade. Don't you ever post the 2001 draft ever again, please.
Oh, that's bad. And just quickly going to the Brett Hull conversation, like obviously, so the Flames win the Cup in '89, and then they still had really good teams from '89. We'll call it to '92. They should have won way more playoff series than they did. They didn't actually end up winning a playoff series, but they probably could have won another cup. But like taking a look at Brett Hull's stats, so 89-90, 72 goals. 90-91, 86 goals. 91-92, 70 goals. 92-93, 54 goals. 93-94, 57 goals. Like, I wonder if you have Brett Hull on those Flames teams, I wonder if that gets them over the top and at least gets them to another Western Conference final or two, or even another Stanley Cup final, even maybe another championship team. Like, he could have been a big time difference on that team.
I like having the debate when people talk about the best goal scorers of all time. People go to Ovechkin and Gretzky, and people bring in Mike Bossy, and I'm like, don't forget about Brett Hull. And a lot of people fight me on that, but I'm like, if you watch the era that Brett Hull was potting 70 goals and then 50 goals, he played in a couple
of goals one year.
It's insane. It's massively insane, and he did it in a couple of different eras as well. And he was very good in St. Louis. He was very good in Dallas and Detroit, winning Stanley Cups. Like he had a really good shot. His patented one-timer down to one knee that would go top shelf almost every single time. Like, he did the Ovechkin thing on the power play before Ovechkin did, and he was just as good at it. And people they knock him because not a lot of people watched the St. Louis Blues back then, because that team was only okay for a lot of those years. And I don't think he gets enough love when you talk about greatest goal scorer of all time. He's not number one or two, but he's definitely in that conversation for top 5 best goal scorer of all time, in my opinion, and one of the best I've ever watched. And he was a joy to watch, even though we only saw him for small time in Calgary, but he was a lot of fun to watch. And he scored that cup-winning goal against Rhett Warner and against Buffalo, and the in the crease thing. And really good series that was as well. So I like Brett Hull. It's a shame it never worked in Calgary for him.
Yeah.
The show is Red Mile Rundown wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate you for making us part of your podcast rotation. And I have yet to tell Robert this because I forgot to text him earlier today. Last week's episode, we did all that mocking Robert. We met the goal. You wanted it to be the most listened to episode we've ever done. It hit just shy of going over 200 for us, which is a good number. 189. So that is our best of all time by about 6 listen downloads. So we appreciate those who have taken the time to make us part of your podcast rotation, and for those listens last week. And hopefully you enjoyed this episode as much or more than you did that one. And we appreciate you as well for doing that and for your questions on today's episode. We will see you next week on the podcast. Enjoy the Stanley Cup Finals. We might have a winner, Robert, next time we talk to the listeners here. So enjoy it, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a great week.